Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
It's Jesse.
And we put an ad out in Soldier of Fortune magazine, and we had 2 respondents, and it's 2 characters from A Blast from the Past. We have Boyd and Isaac with us again. Boyd, say hello.
Howdy.
Isaac.
Hello.
Just real quick, give us a quick update, Boyd, with everything that's going on new and fresh and exciting in your life.
Nice. I've got my paramedic now. I'm going to be taking a little vacation since I passed that. And then I'm going to start exploring my options once I get back from that vacation.
Going to Thailand?
Yep. Going to be overdosing on many new things.
Excellent. How about you, Isaac?
I did start another fire department process. Got pretty close in this round. As we were talking about it last time, I did pass my PAT. Did get 66 on my written, but the captain told me not to be discouraged, that he'd be contacting me sometime the next week. It is now this week, so we'll be seeing what the next update is, seeing if he'll bypass that and work a way around it.
Do you have any recommendations for anyone that's about to take a test? Like you just came off one. Do you have any recommendations for what someone should maybe do before they take their test?
Just study up. They might have personality questions or just more info about the department, but definitely study if it's a more TCFP or an EMT kind of test. Definitely make sure you know your dosages, anything EMS related or fire terminology. That'll help you out a lot.
All right. And Boyd, do you have any words of wisdom for anyone that's about to take a paramedic test?
If you're taking your national registry, coming from just a brand new paramedic that just got out of school, learning the definitions like in the back of your book, really that medical terminology really helps break down your test in the long run, because National Registry likes to throw confusing words out there.
Autoerotic asphyxiation.
Yep. Out.
What's that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to segue off into today's topic. It's a little bit different. We literally were sitting here trying to figure out what we were going to talk about, and Jesse got mad at me because I outlined this thing, pulled out a poster board and glitter, and made it awesome. And he was sad that I had it outlined. Problem is that I'm using big words today, and I won't be able to remember them all. Kind of made an offhanded joke where we were sitting there talking about the 7 deadly sins, and we're going to make a 7 deadly sins of firefighting.
Well, not just firefighting, the fire department in general.
Yes. I actually probably need to go ahead and rephrase that and say this is more of truly station drama, station politics, station whatever.
Having any horizontal object?
Something like that. So, just to recap for everyone, the standard, if you forgot your catechism already, your standard 7 deadly sins is pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. Okay, so yeah, that's all right. Pretty serious thing. All of a sudden, kind of hard to make it a lighthearted, open discussion, but we're not damning your eternal soul off of our discussion. So the 7 things that I kind of threw up real quick was bitterness, insecurity, egotism or parochialism, hubris, dishonesty, isolation, and fear. So at the very end of this, we'll kind of talk about maybe some things that maybe we can do to help. Any one of these would help address these, much less if you were able to actually implement all 4 of them into your organization. So the first one, let's start soft and easy. I'll give this one to Jesse. Bitterness. How is bitterness bad?
You guys are just always after me, and I don't like any of you. I'm gonna, by God, I'll do what I want to do, and you can't make me do what you want me to do. You know, grown man. pretty good example.
I think that's a pretty spot on example. Now, how in the long run, bitterness goes unchecked. What can happen with that? What do you think?
You know, one major thing that happens when somebody's just bitter like that is it doesn't heal. Like that thing never heals itself. It takes work. It takes work from the person that's bitter. It takes work from the people around them. It's not a that's a clean wound that stays open and doesn't heal well at all.
How do you cure it?
It almost has to be a systemic, so it's got to be the entire organization and what you foster as good behavior and positive attitudes, and that part of it is the only way that you're going to get around that. I mean, the first time somebody's has that opportunity, that bitter person, they're going to slip right into that bitter deal. You know, this would be so much more awesome if y'all just put your phones down. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Because you ruined it because I was going to turn around and throw it right at him.
Yeah.
So, now that you've stolen my thunder, Isaac.
Yes, sir.
So, with what Jesse's talking about, can bitterness be strictly systemic in the organization, or can it be an individual?
I'd say it could be systemic. I mean, I'd say with the little bit of the older generation, I remember when I first got on, the older guys were kind of retiring out, but it was kind of that certain group was very dead set in their ways, and you would try to, I guess, do things right, and they would still dog on you for stuff. They were just, I guess, just always bitter about just anything you would do.
So I don't see dead set in your ways as bitter necessarily. I see that as a different thing. I see that bitterness is that almost retaliatory in everything. And to jump back in on what you just said, yeah, it can be the individual, it can be the organization, it could be either or both. If your whole organization, if it's systemic in your whole organization, boy, you got problems, and that's probably a leadership issue.
Damn it, I was just about to toss that over to Boyd there and say, so if you have an entire, and it's not that the entire organization is bitter, but if you had the membership that for all intensive purposes is at odds with each other, they are standoffish with each other, they're bitter, okay? They're at the point of truly not being able to, I want to paraphrase this real quick. I'm not talking about on scene. I've seen some pretty wild stuff inside the departments, and on scene, you'd think you were watching an episode of Wizard of Oz when they're skipping down the yellow brick road. What I'm talking about is closed doors at the station. How do you address a membership that is standoffish, bitter with each other, reactionary, whatever? How do you think you try and address it? And there is no correct answer here.
Yeah.
I'm just asking because you're new.
I think just from me being new, in the universal outside perspective would just be to make them work together, give them trainings where they have to work together, switch them up, different people in different groups, that their bitterness is not in the same group of people, so you're with.
Let's keep going down that
people.
rabbit hole. What's the advantage of training? Because as far as I'm concerned, you're 100% right. Why training? Why not mopping the station floors?
Because you have to work together. You can't just tell someone to
Keep going, though. Why else? It's more than just working together.
It's building friendships, getting to know people.
Yeah, but they're already bitter with each other. You're right about knowing each other. Mm-hmm. What are you building?
I would say that's what you are kind of building, is like that friendship, trust.
You're close. Keep thinking, though, because you're not friends yet. You're still bitter with each other, but you're working together on training. So what are you building?
Teamwork.
Teamwork, camaraderie,
Yeah.
trust. Okay. You're building a common ground. You're building a place to come from. Now, will that ultimately address the entirety of the bitterness? And I'll steal that. I'm going to say no. There's a couple of things that have to happen. At the end of the day, the one thing I would recommend to anyone is find the source of the bitter. There's going to be a universal common cause. It's going to be a person, and you need to go find who it is. Maybe a brand new guy, maybe a chief, maybe someone not even on the department.
I was going to say, kind of with that question earlier, when you asked if it's either individual or systemic, I was going to say I think like individualism kind of creates that systemic role if you just have that one
Yeah,
guy.
if it goes completely unchecked, so let's say that you go
starts
year
knocking
one,
them over like dominoes.
right, and
Yeah.
it just steamrolls throughout the entire department, and it's still one of those things where you need to come back and identify what is the core cause of it, and it's going to be an individual. It's not going to be, the station good luck charm or, a truck that's always broke. That's not it. It's an individual.
And usually the guy that's bitter, I'm going to guess, just wag here and say 90% of the time it's because they didn't get their way or what they wanted. That's going to be where it all came from. That person didn't get their way, didn't get what they wanted, was completely convinced in their mind that their way was the right way and that's what needed to happen. And they hold on to that instead of, and typically in our organization and volunteer organizations in general, it's not a hierarchy. I mean, it's truly not a hierarchy. There's a democratic process. There's votes. The membership has control of their destiny. There's things there where you're not going to get your way 100% of the time. It doesn't matter if you're the chief or the rookie. You're just not going to get your way 100% of the time.
I would argue that as the chief, you don't get your way very often. And if you are trying to truly get your way, you better make sure that you're right in the thing you're trying to get your way on.
Yeah, because the flip side of that, I was the longest serving president of a volunteer fire department in the 100-and-something year history of this volunteer fire department. And I would hold these meetings, and there would be no discourse. And it would literally, I'd bring up something, and we'd try to have a discussion, and nobody would ever be against what I was bringing up. And I felt like that was the most wrong way to have a meeting. Like, I would literally bring something up, and then I'd immediately go on the attack on whatever it was that I brought up. So at least there was some discussion of the other side of the argument. Because it was ridiculous. That is not the way it's supposed to work. It shouldn't be so one-sided that everybody's just falling in line. There should be some discussions and some conversations about this, and you can't be mad when it's your idea didn't get to happen.
Right.
Because it may just be the wrong time for it. It may not be the bad idea. It may just be the wrong time for that idea.
Right. Now, I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole as far as trying to address these because, like I said, at the end, we've got 4 things that I scratched down that I think can be used to attack all 7 of these and pretty much just whack-a-mole it and be done. The question is how aggressive do you want to be in that tact? So I'm going to move down to number 2, insecurity. Isaac, what do you think on insecurity? How's insecurity bad for a volunteer fire department?
I would say maybe, I guess would you put it along with confidence?
Okay.
I would just say you're a leader. I guess you could be a young lieutenant, maybe freshly promoted. Some guys kind of question your call, and you really kind of start to wonder if you're making the right call. And
why is that bad?
Because, they look up to you for an answer, and if you're not 100% that's the correct answer, or you kind of wish-wash between that and another option, the guys kind of lose confidence in that figure, and it all kind of jumbles down from there, since you're supposed to be leading that group, and everybody kind of goes on different, I guess, not everybody's going to be on the same page after that, and it kind of loses trust, and just a whole cluster after that.
Okay. So, Boyd, continuing with this insecurity mindset on scene, how can someone, an officer or chief or even just regular old firefighter, how can their insecurities cause problems on scene?
Maybe insecure about calling shots on a scene. Building's too hot to go in, but they're not sure about it, so they let their guys go in, and next thing you know, they're in a flashover.
Okay. Anything else you want to add to that? What's the impact, long-term impact of a decision like that? Stick with your theme that you have.
After the decision's been made,
Mm-hmm.
I would say the snowball just keeps going downhill, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger with you just honestly questioning every single move that you end up making.
Okay. And the thing I'll add to that is then you have bitterness attached to that. You have someone that made a decision out of insecurity, okay? And there's repercussions for every decision that you make, action that you take, and the lack of confidence and the inability to just stick to a decision leads to a routine pattern.
So I have a completely different take on insecurity altogether. And I don't disagree with what y'all are saying, because it's very true, but I have a completely different take on it. And I think it rolls in tandem with jealousy. And so I think that the insecurity is more of that, this is my scene, and if I let that other department come over here to my scene, they're gonna be the heroes for today, and I'm not gonna get the recognition I want. That cop used his fire extinguisher and put that vehicle fire out, and that's mine, and he shouldn't be doing that. I think that's more where we see insecurity in guys, because you don't know all the answers. You're making these decisions, and there should be a little bit of something in the back of your mind saying, am I making the right decision right now? Because if you're not, you're on autopilot, and you're not going to make the good decisions. You got to kind of self-question some of that stuff to make sure you're doing the right thing on the building and the fire behavior and all that stuff. That I don't have a problem self-questioning whether I'm doing the right thing on that. But it's a split-second thing. It's not lasting 5 minutes while I'm going back and forth in my head trying to figure out what's going on. But I need to look at both sides of that. But I do see that insecurity that's fueled by jealousy as a real problem, because you got somebody jump your call or whatever, and you're afraid that they're going to look better than you, and that's a real insecurity.
It also leads to other immediate, because what you're talking about is a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
And knee-jerk reactions have a tendency to not be based in protocol, guidelines, procedure, training, education, experience, on and on. And knee-jerk reactions have a tendency to cause that proverbial domino to fall. Call comes in, another department jumps it. You're held bent. Jump in the truck, go.
Run 14 people off the road to
Right.
try to get there.
It's one of those things where I look at insecurity kind of like you do, and I actually paint it on two general classes of people, and it's generally on whoever's new. So new to the department, new to being an officer, new to being a chief, just new. Because the desire to impress instead of the desire to just make the right decision becomes problematic in the short term and in the long run.
Seen that a lot.
So, the one thing that I will add to this, kind of what you guys were talking about, is I truly don't believe in a wrong decision is as much as sitting there and hesitating to make a decision. Everything that we do, as long as you're operating in some realm of a safety protocol,
Right.
making a decision and taking action is 10 times more beneficial than pulling out an abacus, getting a Rubik's Cube out, getting your azimuth out, calculators, your chemistry lab test. Just make the decision. Because there's nothing linear about firefighting or rescues or a medical procedure. And everything changes the second you get on scene. So don't expect to be able to use the rule book and be able to exactly every single time, step by step by step, do this. Don't get me wrong, I'm all about muscle memory, but the scene changed, your plan needs to change, make the change. Don't sit there and drag your feet for 12 hours trying to figure out what to do. Okay.
I've said it before a lot of times that you got to make a decision and own it. It's yours. Does that mean that you ride it to the ground and just don't give up on that decision and that deal that tactic that you planned or made? No, absolutely not. You've got to be smart enough to realize when conditions change, whatever changed, that you've got to alter what you were doing and come up with a new plan. That plan is constantly being reevaluated in your mind. But if you make the decision to, when I say own it, if you make the decision to blow the air horn and pull everybody out and then the building doesn't fall down, you own it. That's yours. I made that decision. That was my decision to make. I did that because I felt it wasn't safe for whatever reason, and you're not going to beat me up over it, and you're not going to crucify me because I made this decision.
The dinosaur disapproves.
I own that decision. It's mine. It wasn't because the eagle flew across the sky from right to left, and that was just the reason why we did this. It's more about taking ownership of those decisions than it is owning it and riding it to the ground.
Right. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next one, and I'm going to jump in front of line, and I'm going to take this one. Egotism or parochialism. Parochialism, we'll call that the $10 word of the day. Really, to sum up parochialism, it's being narrow-minded and truly refusing to look at things outside of tunnel vision. And that's maybe a little bit of an over-summary, and it ties into egotism. If you have as a chief, I can say this, if you have an ego problem, oh my God, it's going to show. Now, the kicker is that you can have an ego and get away with it if you are damn good at what you do. If you are really damn good at what you do, and assuming that something happens, we'll just call it a minor mistake, and you have no problem admitting it, then owning it, then the egotism's not going to be. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think egotism's a terrible trait. No one, if you're the egomaniac, let me tell you, no one likes you. They just smile at you, okay, because they don't want to deal with it. And that may be hard to hear for some people, but if you're the egomaniac, I can assure you, people don't like it.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm the best thing to ever ship between two shoes.
And when you compound that with parochialism, which is actually a lot worse than egotism, you really do run into a pretty serious problem, particularly from managing the department point of view, because literally it goes to the meme of the dog sitting in the burning house and saying everything's fine while he's sipping his coffee. And an egomaniac's not going to realize that. They are that dog. And the parochialism in it is they're going to sit there and be consumed by the fire and smile, because they just will absolutely refuse to look outside of that narrow scope of vision.
Well, and they won't take any criticism, any encouragement, any direction, any guidance from anyone else. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it really difficult to sit there and try and work with that, because you even have people that come to them and say, holy crap, man, you've got to notch it back, pull it way, way back, because you're absolutely, not only are you wrong, but at least everyone knows you're wrong, and people are telling you and you're not listening. So, with what I'm talking about, Boyd, how do you think that you might try and handle a really someone with a big ego? How do you as a new guy, how do you try and handle another new guy on the department that's maybe got some ego problems?
Well, not having too much experience with it, it probably wouldn't be too much time hanging out in the living area. It'd probably be most of the interaction that I would have with that person would be on a call or in the bays, just doing getting stuff done for the day, chores. And as far as dealing with them, I think just working with them on scenes and maybe at trainings, that's where I would say that would be the best time to kind of be like, if he messes up, then you can try to help him, teach him if he'll allow it. So.
Well, they won't. He won't. Whoever it is won't. That's a given.
Yeah.
That's a given.
Or they'll act like they're too good for it, and it just gets hard to teach people like that anything.
Okay, so I'm going to segue it over to you, Boyd, or Isaac. You've had the talk. Week later, different call, same problem. Okay. What now? How do you handle it at that point? Like I said, new guy to new guy. You've been here a little longer than Isaac. Well, yeah, been here a little longer than Isaac. Boyd, I'm getting everyone screwed up. But you're still relatively new on the department. How do you handle that with a new guy?
I mean, if it continues, I would just have a simple one-on-one conversation. Don't really want to put them on blast in front of other people. I mean,
that's a big one,
especially with that ego.
That's a real big one. I'm glad
really
you mentioned that, because you got to remember, if you do serve up some humble pie to a true egomaniac, there's no serving it. You're getting the pie slingshot, and you're absolutely pulling as far back as you can, and you're going to shoot it into their face, because, well, you got to rattle their cage.
So there's a couple important distinctions I think you've got to realize and put into perspective. And I'm going to pose this as a question to you, Boyd. What's the difference between confidence and ego?
Between confidence and ego?
Yeah, what's the difference between the two?
Yes.
I would say confidence, you believe it's right, and ego, I'd say, it could be wrong, but since your beliefs are so strong, I guess, in yourself, you don't care if it's wrong or right. You just want that decision to go, I guess, that way. That's how
I think you're
it.
partially right. I think that confidence is you have the ability to do it. Ego, it doesn't matter if you know you can do it or not. you're still right and you're still the best at it. So
Yeah, I mean, you can take really, really extreme examples of this. Let's go something completely in the realm of reality. You guys have been through our academy, you've been on fire scenes, and I ask you to set up a ladder. I know emphatically, with confidence, that you can set a ladder up. One, because I've seen you do it. Two, we've taught the classes. Three, I've seen you in action. Okay? An ego problem with that is not knowing you, asking you to do the same operation, and you telling me, I'm not comfortable with it, I don't know it, and then me just talking you through it real quick and walking away. That's kind of a backwards side into that.
or not talking you through it all and telling you just figure it out. It's your problem.
Right. Well, there is that. I would say that goes to number 4, though, hubris.
Yeah, it does. But they all tie together and work together. I mean, that's why that's on the list, and that's why it makes the list. But I think it's important to realize that there's really competent, and those two things can go together, people, and then there's also the incompetent egomaniac. And those are not the same person, even though on the outward appearance they may look like the same person, but you've got to figure out which is which, and you've got to be able to make that distinction, because there's truly guys that are so confident that they come off as egomaniacs, and they're really not.
And question is how do you spot an egomaniac? Well, you guys have already encountered this in your lives. You're sitting there, you're having a conversation with someone, and what you're talking about, and what they just said is not true. That's not how it's done. That's not the case. That's not the history. That's not it. Okay? And you correct them. And then they double down on it. And then you correct them again. And then they triple down on it. And then continue to tell you a story about how they did X, Y, and Z when you know X, Y, and Z is not possible because that person's just frankly full of crap. That's a classic example of what an egomaniac is. The thing that makes parochialism a little more dangerous is parochialism's, I would typically associate that with someone that's got think of the wise old man. Okay, so they've got the picture down. They sound intelligent, and same thing though, as you're talking to them, you realize that they're wrong. And everything that they're referencing, all their experience, knowledge, whatever, is from one minute single point of reference, and that one point of reference in this case is wrong.
Right.
And that's a parochialism and egotism. They really do tie in, but again, parochialism is actually much more of a bigger problem. Usually, you don't refer to parochialism as to an individual either. It's more of like a hive mind type mentality. I would say you would tie that more into you guys moved to a different state. You've only done wildland firefighting a particular way, and you go to jump on their brush truck, and there's no place for the firefighter to ride in the tailboard of the truck. But you insist that this is the way to do it. So that would be another kind of cheeky offhand example of that.
Yeah, and it falls in line with that. So there's people that truly understand the concepts and the nuances and the what makes things work and tick, whether it's firefighting and I'm pulling this from technicians, air conditioning technicians. I've seen there's 2 categories of them. There's the ones that understand how the stuff's supposed to work, and they fix it because they understand it. And then there's the guy that says, I've seen that before. He can still fix it because he's seen it before, but if it's something new he hasn't seen, He has no basis to make a decision or do anything with it. And that falls into that parochial guy that just his repertoire is only as deep as what he's seen before.
Right. Yeah, and again, he won't step out of that well of experience anywhere else. That's it. That one point of reference, that's it. And that's the thing that makes it so bad is that not only is anything else wrong, it's dangerous. Even though what he's doing, talking about is wrong, and it's making him dangerous. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. Hubris. Hubris is an interesting one. Jesse, you want to tackle hubris?
Negative.
That's actually really funny. Still don't want to tackle it?
Go ahead.
You want me to give it to someone else?
You're going to have to define it for me. And I hate to say that, but that's literally where I'm at on that.
Okay. Tell you what, I will give you the textbook definition of it here. Let me pull up
I know what my humorous is. That's my funny bone. I drill holes in that.
Hubris, a noun, excessive pride or self-confidence. To be used in an example, the self-assured hubris among economists was shaken in the late 1980s.
Yeah.
Okay, so hubris typically comes from a person that's going to be presenting themselves as not necessarily an expert, but a lifetime of experience, long-time experienced, high-end education. Okay, and it is typically presented in a matter-of-fact way, and if you argue against that matter-of-fact way, then that makes you a dumbass.
Or racist.
Or racist. Or transphobe.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's who we're talking about there. But
Right.
Yeah.
Okay? And the problem, the kicker with hubris is that what people do is they will dig in pretty hard when they are full of hubris. And, I mean, it literally takes the world falling around them to collapse and then realize, like, oh, I made the wrong decision. Good example, best life case example of hubris I can give you, the captain of the Titanic.
Yeah.
Okay? Lifelong professional, had all these examples and things of why he shouldn't have been pushing the boat that he was, but he was about to retire, and he wanted his names in the record books for the fastest transatlantic crossing. That's what he was after. Icebergs be damned. Not enough lifeboats be damned. No binoculars be damned. On and on.
Yeah, this is the guy that drives too fast to the call, that does it every time, that tells you, hey, I know what I'm doing. I do this all the time. And then crashes into the bus of orphans. Same guy, right?
Exact same guy. Exact same guy. So now that we have a little bit of a different example of what hubris is, Boyd, how do you think you try and tackle hubris? And let me actually, before I even say that, where are you typically going to see hubris at? Is that a young man's trait or is that more of a dinosaur trait?
I would say dinosaur.
A little more of a dinosaur trait.
And especially coming from a young guy, if you're wanting to ask how to handle that, that's tricky. Young guy exchanging
now
words
that we
with a
have
dinosaur.
hubris, I would say that the egotism, don't get me wrong, that can definitely be an old man trait. But typically, in my vast experience of being 38 years old, the egomaniacs are under 40, and anyone that has hubris, they're over 40. Because usually by the time you get through your 20s, and if you're magically still alive, you've been humbled enough and beaten up enough to be knocked down a bunch of steps, so that ego streak kind of gets knocked out of you. But if you manage to get through that entire time period to be highly successful and progress throughout your career, and now you're that middle-aged man getting into towards the end of his career, and you still haven't had that egotism knocked out of you, that's where hubris really starts to come into play. And they're going to be arguing from a matter-of-fact point, and they're going to be arguing from a point of authority.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting how a single person can share those two traits, like parochialism and hubrism, and they can go hand in hand with the same person. Maybe some people might not have either, but some people will have both, or maybe all three.
Sure,
Well,
yes.
well,
it is.
and I agree with Matt that egotistical problem child is truly the child. That's your 3 to 5 year guy. That's the guy that has the ego problem every time.
A lot of the bigger fire departments out there, New York, Chicago, Miami, Dallas, Denver, Houston, San Francisco, LA, Seattle, I don't want to say that they have a program necessarily in place to deal with that guy that's between year 4 and 6, but it's almost universal in those big departments. Those guys that are now on that year 4 to 6, they all somehow or another get served up a major humbling experience. And it may be that they get shifted to a different station that's intentional, and they get put with Captain Krusty. And, this is a man that would make stone sweat. And, his literally sole job in his life is to crush everyone. He doesn't realize it. That's because, again, he's a stone, so he doesn't care. And you can see that, but usually most entities don't really want people to be ultra cocky. They really don't want them to be full of egotism or advanced into the hubris. About the only place that I know where it's not only encouraged but really beat into people's military.
Yeah, well, I think part of that pilots and people like that, surgeons, they get pushed into that.
Yeah, neurosurgeons, fighter pilots, ultra high-end engineers, architects. I would argue the engineers actually turn into goofballs. So
Yeah.
but yeah, it's going to be a highly technical, highly specific, highly fast-paced, on and on type thing, and that can fall into firefighting, oddly enough. And that's where you do see it. So again, I'm gonna come back before we finish this up. How do you try and tackle that, Jesse?
That's one of those deals where most attempts are going to fail. I don't know the right answer because I think it's very situational and dependent on what you actually do, but I can tell you what not to do. I've got the not to do's. You can't put on the kid gloves. You can't walk on the eggshells. You can't alter your whole organization and your being to accommodate this person's attitude. And if that means that so-and-so's got to go away, that's kind of what that means. You just can't foster that activity and that mindset.
Now, here's the one thing I'm going to counter to this, because I completely agree, 100%. If you have someone that's number 4 is hubris, okay, and you're at the point where it's like, Jesus, we really are on the Titanic right now, okay, I really do agree that the only thing to do there is to do what's best for the organization and address the individual. Now, how you want to address them, well, we'll talk about that later. But that's the only way, is to physically address the individual. And you got to remember the reference, fighter pilots, neurosurgeons, captain of the Titanic, okay? If you're going to confront them, do not beat around the bush. That is a sign of weakness for them.
Yeah.
You are automatically putting them in the upper hand in position because their time, experience, knowledge, training, background are all going to counter that. So if you approach it, you better be very confident in your approach. And I can tell you that absolute directness goes a long ways here. The kicker with this is that the way we speak about this stuff is that it's not fixable. Well, and that's what we're going to talk about at the end of this, is we've got 4 things to try and address all 7 of these. So we'll come back to this one particularly, okay? Next one on the list, this one's pretty simple. I'm going to toss it to Boyd here. Dishonesty. What's the problems with dishonesty?
Can't trust them. Can't trust them.
Can't trust them. Okay? The issue with that is what, Isaac, in the long term with dishonesty?
I mean, it'll go with trust. I mean, it's really hard to build it back up once you're not honest with your people, especially as an officer position. I mean, it's really hard to build it up from there. I mean, everybody's supposed to be looking up to you, and they see that you're dishonest. I mean, you lose a lot of guys, and they probably won't really want to follow your orders as much. I mean, they'll still do it, but I mean, not willingly.
And this one ties directly into, insecurity, a little bit of having an ego. No one wants to get their feelings stepped on. I can tell you that probably one of the bigger benefits that you can have in your life is in truthfulness or dishonesty. It really is. It's a self-reflection of the individual, and just because you're truthful isn't necessarily a bad thing. Best example I can give of this is if you don't know the answer, don't beat around the bush. You don't know the answer. Just say it. Now, it's different if you're at the station and, you're playing Trivial Pursuit versus if you're on scene and you're doing a technical rescue and your captain comes up to you and says, hey, I need you to do this real quick. And you're like, okay, but you have no clue what the hell he's talking about. How's that a benefit? Well, it's not.
And there's a handful of different dishonest people. So there's the guy that's truly just the scum of the earth. Let's just put it that way. The guy that's going to steal, the guy that's going to break things and blame it on somebody else, that's going to blame all their problems on somebody else. There's the guy that just embellishes everything. The Cool Whip, he's going to top everything. There's that guy too. That guy seems harmless enough on the exterior, but I will tell you that guy's just as worse as the other. That guy that's over embellishing every aspect of everything in his life is got those insecurity issues. He's got all those other things that Matt's talking about there. So you need to realize that the little whiteys, the little white lies, are, if they're in enough volume, they're just as bad as I stole the fire truck.
Right. The saving grace in all this is that I'll ask you kind of a trick question. What's the hardest thing about being a liar? The absolute hardest thing.
Selling it?
No.
Believing yourself?
No. Isaac, what do you think?
I want to hear Jesse's opinion.
No. Go ahead. My arm got tired of raising it.
I guess remembering your own lies.
Ding, 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 ding.
Okay. So it's one of those things where, it starts off where they went hiking, and the next year they were hiking and cave diving, and then they parachuted in. And, it's like, wait, what? That's kind of a big, part of the story. Where the hell did that not come in at the very beginning? And then, so you're clued in on it. And then, whatever, you're talking about another topic, and you're like, what in the hell are they talking about? And then now that you're clued in on it, then you start to realize, Jesus, everything they're saying is this way. Everything. Hell, they can't even talk about parking their vehicle without making it into this elaborate shitstorm. And the problem is in the long run, it's a credibility problem. At the core of it, it's credibility. It doesn't even necessarily mean inaction on scene. It doesn't have to be represented on a fire scene. Okay, fine. They can handle a hose. They can handle a fire axe, but I'm sure as hell not going to give them the checkbook. That's never going to happen because I can't even follow the most basic story with them. And it's a real basic thing. If you can't even tell a simple story without making it one of the most absurd, outlandish, ridiculous things on the face of the earth, where you were an underwater sniper rescuing the Pope on a caving expedition. I mean, what?
That's exactly what I was thinking about.
So, I mean, that's at the core of it, I have a problem with that. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with over-embellishing a story just to make it interesting. But there is an extent to how far you can go with it.
Well, yeah, there's a difference between coloring up and using good descriptors and making the story interesting than there is, underwater sniper, Pope rescue, whatever.
I think the kicker on this is that the common theme is that a inherently dishonest person is either always going to make it about themselves or they're always going to deflect it off of themselves. So they'll tell you the absolute most raw truth about an other person, okay? Particularly if it's kind of a squishy topic or icky or whatever. But the second that it's about them, no, the nunchucks come out. And it's just doesn't jive at all with the story that they tell about someone else or an experience. And then, God forbid, when they start actually referencing personal experience, I did this. Holy Christ. What? Now we're in a whole different realm of pathological. And now we're getting into some weird stuff with that. Jesse, you have anything else to add?
PIO material right there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. All right. Now, this next one seems kind of weird at first, but it's isolationism. What's the problem with that, Isaac?
Isolationism?
Yeah, just isolating yourself.
You get isolated because of the recent topics that we just discussed?
No,
Would
no.
that be part of it?
Well, I mean, technically no, but technically yes, too. But we're just talking about the isolationist principle in general.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
I wouldn't even know where to start on that one.
Okay, I'm gonna kick it over to Boyd real quick. Boyd, you want to try and tackle this one?
I'm kind of on the same boat.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the biggest cliche answer of the whole world right here. I cannot find the I in team.
But there's an M-E in it.
Yeah. If you find it, it's in the a-hole. But that's your answer. That person is not a team player. They're not going to be a team player. You rarely will force them to be a team player. They probably have some other social disorder that's causing that in some cases, that's keeping them from joining in on the team. Probably not their spot. They're probably not a fit.
The other thing I'm going to add to this is that if you're an isolationist, that means you're not open to new ideas either. And that has a tendency to feed into other mindsets. Again, this is where kind of that egoism, parochialism type characteristics kick out, where you refuse to consider other input because they're wrong.
Yeah.
Without even evaluating the discussion, topic, training, whatever. This is how we do it. You will do it our way. We are not open to anyone else's critique, considerations, standards, or what they've learned in their past. We could care less. This is our tradition.
Yeah.
And
And that's universal, big or small, department wise. That
Right.
happens to all of them. So you can't, you can't pin that on small departments, big departments. That I've seen that everywhere. And
oh yeah, no. It's you've got thousands of years of tradition impeding progress daily.
yeah,
Period. And that's really kind of how I added isolation on the 7 deadly sins, because it just gets to a point where people, and I've heard these arguments before. I've talked to other fire departments where they're struggling, and you say, well, have you considered trying this? And they're like, well, no. Okay, why not? Well, that's not how we do it. You're right. Good luck. See you next year. Because it really is. It's a really narrow mindset. You get out of your comfort zone. It challenges your ability to accept new ideas. And then you start breaking all these other ones almost immediately. And if you're wrapped in a nice little warm blanket of comfortable and easy, well,
and I think that one feeds into the death of lots of organizations, not just the fire service. I think you see that in a lot of your other, we'll call them fraternal organizations, the Elks, the whatever, the Moose, the whoever they are. Those organizations are on the decline. I think that's one of the ones that feeds into the decline of a lot of volunteer organizations in general, not just fire departments.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think that one gets you. That one's to the nut cutting on some of that stuff.
All right. Now, the last one seems kind of simple, but at face value, it's there's a reason it's number 7. Fear. How is that a firefighting deadly sin?
Well, surely, Boyd.
I'm sorry, we can't go up the tree because I'm scared of cats.
Is that what I'm talking about?
No.
It's not what's in my mind, but give it another sling there,
Well,
Boyd.
we'll let Isaac, you think about it for half a second. Isaac, what do you think?
Fear. I guess maybe you're inside a structure fire, you get kind of freaked out and flake out on the guy you're inside with. I mean, it's kind of where I'm going with leaving them on the hose line by themselves inside and just running out.
I'll say I don't think you're wrong in the contextual sense of how you're using fear, the physical fear of an action.
Yeah, and I think that's on the individual level. I think there's 2 different levels of this.
So, Boyd, what do you think I'm talking about here with fear?
Just flick some boogers on the ceiling and see if they stick.
When I'm thinking about fear, yeah, got me.
Jesse?
Do you remember the no fear stickers that were on everybody's? Oh, they put them on fire trucks. People had them on their cars. It's just no fear. And I always looked at that and thought, man, that's probably a pretty scary way to be. You need a little bit of fear. You need a little bit of concern and a sense of caution for some things. And it's more of a sense of caution. But the fear that's the big killer, and it kills the department, not the individual, is the fear to grow and change.
Right.
And that's the one that gets you, because that puts you into that isolationist category. It puts you into that, all those other things that we talk about. That one's the one that can encompass all the 6 others and
Right.
and lump them into a pile.
Yeah, and there's a reason that it's number 7. Because go ahead.
I was just said hashtag long coats and hip boots for life.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it is it's something that again, it really ties into what we were talking about with isolationism and your tradition, a modern age, modern messaging, and ultimately the way to adapt. And don't tell me that fire departments don't adapt. Thermal imagers, air packs, PPE, new tools. You adapt to make your life easier.
All the time.
So why on earth sit there and be terrified of something new? Now, we'll go ahead and make this one of those weird conversations. There's a whole bunch of political hot topics right now, and we could pick any number one of things to sit there and try and make the department a lightning rod for whatever political, social agenda that you want to make it. But the fact of the matter is that all you're trying to do is make sure that you have got people on your department to go to fire calls. And at least from my perspective, I could care less. Now, with that said, you need to understand that if you're the outliner, you're different, and you come in and you intentionally make yourself different, well, that's not how we operate. At the end of the day, everyone has to be able to work together. Now, there's a whole bunch of things that have to happen for that to happen, okay? But at the end of the day, trying to come in and build your own monument to yourself on your individualism's not going to work. I mean, the department's, as far as I'm concerned, has done due process in giving you the opportunity to interview and see if you're willing to be part of the team. And that's the kicker. We're not, literally sword fighting here or dueling pistols. It's a team sport. And I need people that's going to make the team function at its highest capability possible. And I truly believe that individuals with different perspectives can benefit a team. But without that, also, when the individual intentionally goes out of their way to make themselves the individual, we have a problem with that. And you can't turn around and take that traditional threat and throw it back on the department and say, well, you're afraid of me. No, there's a bridge. We've met you halfway across it. You gotta come to the other side so that we can actually work together. And I mean, you can step out of that and go to something a little more mundane. An ESD. Volunteer departments sometimes are scared to death to have that discussion. That's a good discussion to have. There's a lot of things that can be learned, at least from our perspective, and there's a whole bunch of things that I tried to pick up from ESDs and implement it into our organization that are ESD-like. And I would argue that our membership's probably one of the strongest, generally, anti-ESD departments out there. We also have personnel. We have training. We're literally armed to the hilt with tools, equipment, and apparatus, and we have multiple stations. We just don't have the problem that a lot of other smaller departments are scared to death about when you have the ESD discussion. Doesn't mean that discussion shouldn't happen, but shutting it down immediately just to say no, well, what? You have nothing to learn from this? No. Okay.
And back to my point that you have to have a healthy amount of fear for certain things, and it's not necessarily fear as much as it is you've got to question and look at things from multiple perspectives, and that goes in with what you were saying in the individuals, but it also goes into the looking at the department as a whole. Truly, your biggest fear here should be the fear of not having personnel.
Well, from my perspective, that's all I care about.
That's the biggest fear. So anything we can do to keep that fear from coming a reality, that's probably what we need to do. I mean, there's going to be some things we do wrong, and there's going to be some things that don't work out in that. But to hang our hat on, we've tried that before, or we can't do that, or we're scared of doing that, which is typically what happens. That puts you closer to that ultimate fear. And there's a lot of departments out there that are, they're 3 guys and they have 7 trucks, so they can't even get all the trucks out the station. They're everywhere. They're all over the entire state and country. And that's the fear you got to work against.
Right. Okay. Now, to kind of shift gears, by no means are we strictly tied to this, but these are 4, I'm going to call them inherent core concepts that we're going to call them that counter the 7 deadly sins, but they're also, I would define like the overall health of the organization by these concepts. So the stronger they are, the healthier the organization is, the stronger you are across the board with all of them is even a better indicator of the health of the organization. So it's just kind of the law of averages. So if you had 5 golden woodchuck stars to give and only 1 in category and 0 across the board on the other 3, well, it's not necessarily the healthiest organization on the face of the earth. Whereas if you got a solid 3 on everything across the board, you're in better shape. Okay. The first one I have is just leadership. Someone to propose an idea and take the step forward. The kicker with this, and my definition of a really good leader, is someone that is willing to take a problem, propose a solution, and then ultimately, good or bad, openly discuss what happened from that. Jesse, do you have anything you want to add to leadership?
I think that fell right in what I was just saying.
Okay. Because leadership's going to address bitterness across the department.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership's going to really address insecurity because it's going to give you a path going forward. That's the whole reason that you have the proverbial chief is, damn it, that's the direction we're going. We know what that person is. That's what we're doing. It can address egotism in young men, and it can also address parochialism in older men. But it's that's a off of that discussion again. That I look at that from the leadership point of view is where you're literally addressing the individual. Hubris. This is where leadership's at. The definition of it. And I won't go into the 50 different types of like leaders there are, because there's a bunch of different types of leadership out there. Dishonesty, it's kind of a face value of that. A leader's going to kind of stomp that out almost immediately. Isolationalism, how open are they? And then ultimately fear. Now the next one's communication. Jesse, what's your thoughts on how communication can help with not only these 7, but an inherent strength of the department?
Well, it's the same in on scene or off scene, and the fact that you've got to try to get the vast majority or everybody, ultimately everybody, on the same page. The only way you can accomplish that is through good, effective communication. You lose people to them not knowing what's going on or not knowing what they're supposed to do. And it goes all the way to the initial 5 minutes of them walking in and handing you an application. If they don't know what step number 2 is after they hand you that application, how do you expect anybody to succeed in becoming a member of your department? And that's ultimately where it starts there and it ends to the point of the chief's got to let the Indians know what to do.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen with other departments in the area, we'll get people that live over there and we're like, well, did you check them out? And they're like, yeah, we'll send in an application, but I didn't get anything back. Well, I'm like, well, that's a rough communication issue. And let's not follow that way.
Yeah.
Let's get better. But
We preach it in rookie school. We preach it in training. We have to preach it in our organizational and our department meetings and everything else. It's most of the time when there's opposition to an idea or a proposal. A lot of times that opposition is due to a failure of communication or the inability to communicate your plan and idea effectively. So
I would agree. Now, Isaac, I'm going to toss this one at you. Direction. So what am I talking about? How is a department or an organization having a direction? How is that a core value?
I know I'd tie it in with kind of communication because, I mean, I would just say the way you communicate and you kind of get that sense of direction on where you're going with certain events. But
I'm gonna toss it back on you. If you have a department that has a strong direction, in other words, mission statement, ethos, morals, just that's what they're known for. Okay, how can that strong direction be a positive impact in the long term for the organization?
I'd say, I mean, I guess you could go kind of community relations going along with your mission statement, trying to positively impact those around you in the community and build better characters out of your firemen, and they just kind of snowballs as well.
Kind of be
but
like
in
a
good way.
guideline for your membership.
Right. Yeah, I mean, ultimately that's why you have your SOPs, SOGs. But again, it doesn't matter if you're in Guatemala or in Texas. What's a firefighter supposed to do? Well, they're supposed to go out in the community and go do good things. Okay, that's a universal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a core value. So the problem is that if that's challenged on your organization, where even you're at the point where that's challenged, you know, you're a ghost ship, a ship not tied off in a storm. You have no direction and you're being pushed around by the environment around you. You're flailing around. That's probably the easiest way I can really sum up direction is that if you have core values, solid articles, Constitution articles, bylaws, solid SOPs, solid SOGs, a mission statement that people actually understand. This is something that even in the lack of leadership or even in the lack of communication, you don't even have to have communication. And this is where I'll come back on tradition. If you have a solid tradition, the tradition will help you carry the organization going forward.
right.
I mean, I guess with direction, I'll go back and I guess kind of answer that question where I struggled. But I guess I see some of the other departments, maybe not too close from us, but that they'll have a very good fire prevention program, and they really don't get that many fires because they educated the community so well. And I mean, they kind of
That would be a really good example of that.
kind of take away some of their work, but in a way, they are improving
Yeah,
the
no,
community.
that would be a phenomenal example of that. Boyd, do you have anything you want to add to direction?
That's about it. Kind of what you're saying. Less fires in the community, but as always, God bless the ghetto.
All right, now I'm going to toss team environment to you.
Team and environment?
Team
Oh,
environment.
team environment. Kind of go back to what I was saying earlier that we both agree on was training.
I was just about to say, I'm going to scratch team environment, and we're going to just call that training.
Well, the two are synonymous with each other. They really are.
They work hand in hand.
So a department that has strong training, how does that address the 7 deadly sins?
Causes people to work together, create the camaraderie with teamwork. I'm kind of stealing off you from what you said earlier, but, you know, it really forces people to not just think by themselves and use their ego. And especially if they're wrong, then you just watch them screw up. And then that's when you're like, all right, you can't, you're owning up by messing up right now. So it's time for us to help you, and we're going to help you. It's not an option. And, just kind of across the board,
I mean, it
picks
relates,
that up.
I mean, it relates to so many of those 7 sins. I mean, insecurity.
No, it
train
relates to all
better.
7 of them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, plain and simple.
So the only adder I have is that, you have any idea how much corporate America spends on team building camps and retreats and exercises and all that stuff?
Oh, I would bet it's hundreds of billions of dollars.
I would think it's got to be in the billions. And we literally, in our organization, and most fire departments in general, do those things all the time, every day. Those things that they're paying a fortune for are the things we're doing as an organization anyway. And so they got that from somewhere. Where did they get it from? Us, the military. That's where they got that from. And it must work. They spend a lot of money to do it. So
Yeah, training's one of those things. Just to segue for a second, good training can indicate health of an organization, whether it's corporate, whether it's a big business, small business, whether it's volunteer. Training can literally indicate the overall health of the organization. And you will find a pretty solid commonality between weak training and weak business. That's not a misnomer out there. And you look at other companies that spend a colossal amount of money on training, they happen to be very profitable too. To bring it back home a little more realistic, I've always, and I've said this before, and I'll die believing this, that training in a volunteer fire department is the heartstrings of the organization. If you truly want to fix the organization, you fix it through training. Will it happen tomorrow? No. But applied pressure, continuous training, and you will go in and you will start to address all these issues throughout the organization. And the benefit of it is that training's the one place where it forces everyone to come together. Age doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, sex doesn't matter, knowledge, experience doesn't matter, because it pulls everyone to the exact same point. And you naturally rely on the instructor and then senior versus junior. And it forces an interaction. It forces the ability for them to communicate, even if it's short. It forces messages to be crossed, common understandings accomplished. And from common understanding, you now have the ability to build off of that. And I mean, that's like my 2 cents speech. And out of all of this is that if you're on a VFD, or hell, even a paid department or a business or whatever, and it's got some pretty serious health issues, morale problems, and the 7 deadly sins have kind of hit home, I'm telling you, how you fix it's through training. That's how you fix it. That gives you your foundation right there. And then you go in and you ultimately figure out direction, communication, and leadership. And you not only have the foundation, you have a structure to work off of. And if you can truly get training established, make it legitimate, make it usable, make it rewarding, you're going to see that the 7 deadly sins somehow or another kind of cure themselves.
Yeah, I'm just going to pose this question to you, because we did have a time recently during COVID where our training program was basically gutted by other than our wishes. We couldn't have group trainings. We couldn't do that. Did you see an uptick in some of the 7 things that we've got on this list? Did you see a growth in that with the lack of training coming from a department that's pretty solid and has a good training program to that training program disappearing for that short period of time? Did you see a growth in some of those things?
Probably the biggest one that I would have saw is I'd probably see a buildup of probably bitterness and probably a little bit on the ego side, because now people are rooted and they no longer have an exposure. And so basically you get stuck in your ways. And it's not that your ways, granted that, I'm trying to think, how long did we actually have the quote unquote training suspension? Let's call it a year.
A little less than that, because we jumped back in as soon as we thought we could get away with it. But
Maybe 6
months, 8 months.
I think it was more like 8.
Yeah.
Because every time we tried to gear it up, stupid next lockdown and next variant was out.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, what I'm referencing there is really minor.
It was just little glimpses of some of this stuff, and I saw some of them. I saw a little bit of everything there on
Sure.
that list, but it was just little glimpses of it, and I think our organization was strong enough that we saw through the other side of that. But I feel pretty confident there was a lot of them that didn't.
Yeah, I have a tendency to believe that once bad habits are learned, they have a tendency to stay. And particularly when you're not having the opportunity of training to help try and crack the bad habits become doctrine, become ideology.
Yeah, and even for us, there was a thirst and a hunger for that training to come back, and so the minute we started having trainings, we immediately got people back involved. But if you would have been out of the training loop for 2 years, let's say, do you think you would have got all those people back? Do you think that thirst would have still been there? I don't think it would have. I think that you would have lost people to the comfort of not having to do that anymore.
I think one of the saving graces for us is that the average age of the membership's so young.
Young, and they need it, and they know they need it, and they want it.
So you splice that, and you go to an organization that already had bad training, weak training, not effective training, then take a year and a half, 2 years off. And I think that could be difficult to overcome. To me, the way out of that loop is just to come out of the gate firing with a really strong training scenario. And it's not the PowerPoint of death.
No, it's got to be hands-on. It's got to be field training, doing hands-on skill stuff. That's the PowerPoint of death doesn't do much for your team building. That's your knowledge base. That's developing your knowledge base for your individuals to have the understanding of how things work. The team building entirely comes from the hands-on side, 100%.
We have got to be getting long.
Yeah, we are a little bit long, but it's not terrible. And
Okay.
I brought that whole thing up and that deal to try to, one, reinforce how important training is, but to maybe let somebody out there that's wondering what the heck's going on with my organization, maybe that'll shed some light on it for them, because I'm like you, and I believe training is the key to the whole ball of wax. That's the glue that holds the whole thing together. And as a training guy, it's good for me to believe that. Whether or not I'm right or wrong doesn't matter, but it's good for me to believe that.
I can just speak from personal experience. The training is how I rose up through the department. Just is, period. And in that time, with different captains and a whole bunch of different people that participated and helped in those classes, the rookie school, yeah, it's a colossal pain. I've enjoyed every single one I did, especially when I finally showed up. Don't get me wrong, I was dreading it until I got here. The second we started, I was fine and enjoyed it. And everything with training has always been that way with me. And I think a lot of that comes from my particular background. Frankly, training, not doing it's not an option. Generally, it means death. So it kind of ties into the whole firefighting thing pretty easily, because at the end of the day, we're not training on how to sew patches on. There's a pretty practical skill side that needs to be exercised.
For sure.
Guys, do you have anything you want to add to this?
No.
Yeah, I'm good on my side.
I want to thank you all for participating in this, because it's good. It shows another perspective. Matt and I generally have pretty similar views on what things are and how things work, but it's good to have that different viewpoint of the younger guys versus the crusty veterans, and the firefighter versus the officer kind of side of things. And I do want to thank y'all for participating.
Yeah, again, this is kind of a deep dive discussion. I mean, that's not an easy discussion to just kind of literally be thrown into. And like I said, my preparation for this was about 5 minutes before we started. So just, I guess my closing thing is don't ever hesitate to engage. That's probably one of the hardest things to ever do in an organization. And there's a big difference between engagement and gossip.
Yeah.
And you're the one that has the ability to control that. Gossip's pretty easy to baby seal club. It's actually exceedingly easy to baby seal club. Most people don't.
No, they don't.
So with that said, again, thank you for your time tonight, guys. Jesse, I'm going to turn it over to you for the closing statement.
So if you got any questions, concerns, comments.
Theories, conjectures, or interjections.
Is that all of it?
No.
You can drop
condolences.
Condolences. You can drop us a line at ittastelikeburning@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. If you're on your favorite podcast player and you're listening to us, we need the review. We need the thumbs up, the 1 star, the 5 star. We need that to get the algorithms to push this out to even more people. We're pleasantly surprised with the number of folks that are listening and where they are all over the country and the world. And we're not doing this for anything other than fun and pleasure and enjoyment. So help us enjoy it a little bit more and tell us how terrible we are. So with that, I don't have anything else. You got anything else?
No, sir.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Good evening, and y'all enjoy.